Okay, well, good evening. I noticed this afternoon that on the KTD website, I was listed as, this class was listed as being taught by Lama Losong. And as you can see, I'm not Lama Losong. So maybe some of you are surprised. He would have been surprised if I would have called him up and said, "You're on tonight." So anyway, this is who you get. And I'm delighted to be here. And it is my aspiration that I can pass on some tips on doing Tonglen and overcoming obstacles to the Tonglen practice. I will probably have some time for Q&A at the very end. And the procedure is to put your questions in the chat box. And we'll work from the chat box. And I think questions are important. And Rinpoche has said that if you have a question and ask it, there are probably 2 or 3 other people that have the same question that don't want to ask it for one reason or another, but need to hear it. So keep that in mind. And so we'll start out with our beginning prayers. Dorje Changchen Telo Narodang Marpa Mila Choje Gampopa Dusan Cheja Kunken Karmapa Chezi Chunge Gyupa Zinamdang Dritox Salsam Halden and Druk Pasok Zablam and Chagya Chela Nyane Pe Nyame Drogon Dakpo Kagula Solwa Depso Kagyu Lamanam Yupazino Namtar Jen Jalop Jenlo Gomke Kangpar Sang Pajen Zainor Kunla Chakchen Me Padang Seder Dotak Chope Gom Chenla Nekor Chanpa Mepa Jen Jalop Mogu Gomki War Song Pajen Menak Jerko Jepe Lama La Yundu Solwa Depe Gom Chen La Chomen Mogu Kewa Jen Jalop Yang Me Gomki No Shir Sung Pajen Gangchar Tope No Wo So Made Macho Dekar Jokpe Gom Chen Lam Gom Jar Lodang Drawa Jen Jalop Nam Tok No Wo Chokor Sun Pajen Chiang Mayan Chiryang Charwala Magak Ropar Charwe Gom Chenla Korde Yerme Topar Jengilop Kewa Kuntu Yangdak Lama Dang Dralme Choki Palalong Choching Sadang Lamki Yonten Rab Zokne Dorje Changi Gopang Nur Top Shok Dorje Changi Gopang Nur Top Shok Sanjay Chodang Soki Chok Nam La Jang Jop Bardu Dakni Kyap Sutri Daki Jin So Ke Pe So Nam Ki Rola Penchir Sanjay Rupar Shok Sanjay Chodang Soki Chok Nam La Jangja Bardu Dakni Yapsutri Daki Jinso Ke Pe So Nam Ki Rola Penchir Sanjay Rupar Shok Sanjay Chodang Soki Chok Nam La Jangja Bardu Dakni Yapsutri Daki Jinso Kepe So Nam Ki Rola Penchir Sanjay Rupar Shok Semchan Tamche Dewa Dang Dewe Gyudang Den Par Gyurchik Duknal Gigyu Dang Ral War Gyurchik Duknal Mepe Dewa Dam Padam Min Ral War Gyurchik Ne Ring Chak Dang Nidang Ralweg Tengyon Shenpola Ne Par Gyurchik Semchen Tamche Dewada Dewe Gyudang Denpar Yurchik Duknal Gigyudang Gralwar Yurchik Duknal Mepe Dewa Dampadang Min Ralwar Yurchik Nevring Chakdang Nidang Railway Kyongyon Chempolane Argyurchi Semchen Tamche Dewa Dang Dewe Gyudang Den Pargyurchik Duknal Gigudang Gralwar Yurchik Duknyal Mepe Dewa Dampada Min Ralwar Yurchik Navring Chakdang Nidang Railway Tongyon Shenpola Nepar Yurche. We're not going to do the 7-branch beyond. Okay, great. Well, now let me bring my talk up. And so to begin with here, Tonglen, it's about love and compassion and working on developing and deepening our love and compassion. And very simply, love is wanting beings to be happy, and compassion is wanting to be having beings be free of suffering. The four immeasurables spell it out a little bit more, where the first one is, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, and may all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. I once was talking to a person about happiness, And I literally got this response when I was talking about happiness. Quote, happiness is such a vague concept. So we want to be clear about what happiness is and what it isn't. And in Buddhism, we are really talking about the long term. We certainly want beings to be happy in the short term, but what is most important is to have lasting happiness, having the causes of happiness that lasts, that is beyond happiness that might last for a few minutes or a few days, and then is gone. And we've already chanted the four immeasurables, so I'm not going to go into them too much. But the next point that I want to make is that when we do any practice, our aspirations or our motivation is important. And with Tonglen, it's a Mahayana practice. And there are three types of motivation. They are all considered acceptable. And I feel that this is an important point. The three are king-like, boatman-like, and shepherd-like. So a king-like motivation is that a person that is preparing to be king trains in the skills necessary to be a king and gathers the resources that a king will need to perform his or her, if in case of a queen, duties. And this would include the necessary people that in your, you might say, cabinet. And then when you gather all the resources have been trained properly, then you start benefiting your subjects. The boatman-like is that the metaphor goes back to Tibet, where you would have these rivers and you would need to get from one side of the river to the other shore, and bridges were far and few between. And so you would have a person with a boat that would take you to the other side, and there might be quite a few people that could fit into the boat. And here the metaphor is that you want to take a few people with you as you travel the path to the goal. And the shepherd-like is the most inclusive, and that is if you're herding sheep, you have to be the last one because they're always going off in one direction or another, and you are chasing after the stragglers and bringing them back with the rest of the flock. And you become the last one that gets to the goal. That is the strongest motivation. All of these work, they're all considered fine. And it's good to look at your motivation and in terms of how you actually are feeling about your motivation. The most important thing is that you're traveling the path to not only benefit yourself, but benefit others, and eventually liberate all sentient beings. Now, of course, the causes of happiness are virtuous behavior, and that ultimately, because of our Buddha nature, we have the seed of happiness that is permanent happiness. Great bliss would be another way to look at this permanent happiness. But in the meanwhile, in the relative world, that we can have the causes of happiness, and we can have the causes that obstruct our experiencing happiness in the relative world. So virtuous behavior is extremely important. And in terms of the causes of suffering, again, this has to do with karma, just like the causes of happiness in the relative world. And it's non-virtuous behavior. And we suffer not because of punishment, but very simply because of cause and effect. When we do things that plant negative karma, that plants the seeds, when they sprout, grow, and bear fruit, we suffer. And the point of all of this is that as we go through our lives, that we experience getting what we don't want, we experience not getting what we do want, and we experience all pervasive suffering. And the reason why the Buddha talks about suffering so much is to help us understand the futility of succeeding in samsara. That the Buddha gave us a path that leads to escaping from the suffering of samsara. And it is our responsibility to follow the path, work on ourselves, and you might say get out, escape from samsara. And this is where Tonglen comes in handy. It's a very, very useful exercise in working with our minds, our egotistical thinking, our dualistic thinking about I am different from everybody else. And it is very simply an exchange between yourself and another being, and you're removing the suffering from another being, and you're giving them happiness. We are just, you might say, a mental exercise. Since we're not bodhisattvas, we can't actually take the suffering of another being. So this is a mental exercise. Any little bit of happiness that we experience in life. And we follow the breath with the Tonglen, and there's a detailed visualization that is done. You visualize yourself, and then you visualize the person that you are doing the practice for in front of you. And when you are inhaling, you imagine that you are removing the suffering from that being in front of you. And it comes in the form of thick, hot, black smoke, almost thick like tar, burning rubber tires, and so forth. And it's bringing with it the suffering that that particular being is having. And then we inhale it, it goes into our lungs, and then disappears. It's a visualization. And then when we exhale, we are giving them, you might say, the antidote, something in us that will make them happy. It could be our health, it could be our wealth, it could be just plain our happiness, whatever is making you happy at the time. It could be many, many different things that could make that person happy. And there are misunderstandings about suffering and compassion. So here is a quote. Compassion is what we feel when we focus on the person or animal who is suffering, not what we feel when we focus only on the suffering. So we're trying to focus on the being that is suffering, not so much on the suffering. That if we keep focusing on the suffering, as the suffering is the object of compassion, it can get to be overwhelming. So we focus on what we can do for that being that is suffering. And that being specifically. And we also want to keep our thoughts of self-interest from arising. That here is another definition. Compassion is to, quote, care so keenly for others that you give rise to courage and determination to relieve them of their suffering. Now, compassion is inherent to everyone, and it's a matter of nurturing the seeds that are already there, that you already have. I attended a teaching that Mingyur Rinpoche gave, one of his teachings, and he said this: even an alligator has compassion and love for themselves. When they're hungry, they attack. And if they feel threatened, they retreat. So when they're hungry, they want to be satisfied and they look for a meal. And when they are feeling they're in danger, they retreat. And we are like that too. But of course, we can, being human, we can work with that compassion and extend it to all beings eventually. Now, traditionally, you would start with your mother as the object of compassion. In Tibet, Lama Karma told me this, that in Tibet, you view your mother almost as a goddess. And so it would be natural, if you're wanting to develop compassion, you would start with your mother and visualize your mother in front of you and inhale your mother's suffering and give her love in return. And well, that's fine in Tibet, but in this country, it is gets more complicated. It can get quite complicated. And in fact, so I'm going to talk about obstacles today. And the first point that I want to make is that by working with obstacles, we can turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones. We don't have to eliminate the obstacles. We just work with them in a positive way. And so having a positive outlook is very, very important, rather than being overwhelmed by these obstacles. And the first one in America, and perhaps in the West, but I'm most familiar with America and Americans, it's low self-esteem and other ways that we look at ourselves. And here is a quote by Mingyur Rinpoche. An astonishing number of people are crippled by depression, self-hatred, and agonizingly low self-esteem, end quote. And today, it seems like we have an epidemic of anxiety, fear, that there are so many obstacles right now that need to be worked on in terms of how we view ourselves. That people spend so much time accumulating outer wealth, filling up the present, planning for the future, living in an unpleasant past, but very little time is spent cultivating inner wealth, which would be qualities like compassion, patience, generosity, equanimity, and so forth. And so basically, if you don't have compassion for yourself, how can you have it for others? So there's a remedy for self-hatred, for low self-esteem. It's very important to generate compassion for oneself, and then based on that, generate it for other people. The Karmapa talks about this too. And he says that usually our compassion is turned outward, but that we should have the courage to turn it inward and investigate how we suffer ourselves. That we can use this pain that we experience as a basis for developing real compassion. And then based on that real heartfelt compassion for ourselves, extend it out from ourselves to others. Here is a Gyalwang Karmapa quote. We then begin to truly understand their situation. They suffer as I do. How great it would be if they were released from it. So just as we see our suffering and have compassion for ourselves, so we develop it for others based on our own experience. And the Karmapa says, quote, this way of generating compassion is very, very important. Now, based on that, and plus my own experience, I used to be a prison chaplain, and I worked with a lot of inmates. And then, of course, as a Lama, I've worked with a lot of people in different KTCs and done programs at KTD. And I have found the same thing actually is not too different with people outside of the prison system. And it is low self-esteem, having very low opinions about themselves, and so forth. And so I have developed a Tonglen exercise that is intended to develop our compassion for ourselves, our love for ourselves. And it's based on the fact that we have an inner critic. We have an inner voice that is constantly giving us, you might say, negative messages about ourselves. When I started realizing that I had an inner critic when I first started practicing meditation, I hung up a sign in my kitchen that said, the beatings will continue until morale improves. And in small letters, the management, recognizing my inner critic, which was constantly telling me how I constantly screw up, I constantly am doing things wrong, making mistakes, you idiot, and things like that. If you don't have an inner critic like that, well, congratulations, you're doing great. But it pays to pay attention to what this inner voice is telling you all the time. And you might find out that what it's telling you is like a soap opera, and it's reruns of a soap opera. So who wants to watch reruns of a soap opera? So first I'm going to read this Unlocking the Heart exercise, and then we're going to do it for a little while. So there is a Tibetan saying, if you have a warm place in your heart for yourself, you will be comfortable wherever you go. End quote. We can learn to nurture that warm place. Here is a simple exercise in growing that warm place. This is the key to unlocking our heart. The exercise is called taking and sending, Tonglen. It is a practice of sending love and removing suffering. It is best to sit cross-legged on a meditation cushion on the floor as you would when meditating. It can also be done in a chair. Visualize yourself in the future, perhaps 5 minutes into the future, sitting in front facing you. When you breathe in, imagine you are inhaling black smoke coming from the visualized you in front. It carries with it your self-loathing, anger towards yourself, helplessness, powerlessness, any negative feelings your inner critic tells you. This is compassion, wanting to remove your future suffering. When you exhale, imagine breathing out white light, which goes to the you in front and soaks into you. Like the future you is sunbathing and soaking up the sunlight. The light carries with it contentment, satisfaction, cheerfulness, joy, delight, well-being, lightheartedness, forgiveness, transferring it from the present you to the future you. This is love. Compassion for all, including yourself, is necessary for spiritual growth. The smoke you inhale can contain any thoughts that you hold on to that cause you to suffer. You may become aware of other things causing you to suffer as you practice this exercise over time. Make a list if you like. Include the items on the list and the black smoke coming from the visualized you in front. The smoke goes into your lungs, dissolves, and disappears. The negativity and suffering does not accumulate in you. Concentrate on a few specific things in one session. The in-breath is short as you are breathing normally. When exhaling, we are preparing that warm place in our heart. Love is wanting people to be happy. And again, remember you are a person too. and worthy of love without earning it. Sometimes it can be difficult to know and experience love free from negative emotions. Fondness, tenderness, warmth, and non-sexual intimacy are associated with love in this practice. The light you are exhaling can carry anything that makes you truly happy. When inhaling, you remove the things that cause you to suffer. Now think of the antidote and give it to this future you. The intimacy is that you allow yourself to look into the places where fear and loathing lurk. Then you can apply the remedy, love, to those places. In that warm place, you treat yourself like a loving mother treats her infant. Whatever the child does, the mother responds with tenderness, warmth, fondness, and gentleness. Now you can have that love you may never have had as a child or even as an adult. You don't need to seek it in others. Just look inside to experience love. This is intended to be done regularly for 5 to 10 minutes. As you practice more, it's fine to extend the time if you like. During any one session, you can concentrate on a few things to inhale and a few other things to exhale. Use whatever is most needed at the time. One day it might be anger and forgiveness, another fear and fearlessness. This way the lock slowly opens. You begin to discover the advice of your inner critic is inaccurate and does not need to be followed. Open the door and venture out into an open, spacious world. Take that warm spot in your heart with you wherever you go. Now you can be more compassionate and loving with whoever you encounter in your daily life. Compassion and love are healthy and easily passed on. So now we're going to do this Tonglen exercise for 5 minutes. Well, that completes the exercise, and I want to remind you that now the person that you are visualizing in front of you is the old you. You have become the future you. When I have done this with inmates, some of them even visualize the future you in street clothes rather than the prison clothes. In other words, we can visualize a new version of ourselves, a healthier version of ourselves, a kinder, more loving person. And gradually, little by little, we change and become kinder, more forgiving, more loving, and so forth. Here's a quote by Triyana Rinpoche. A healthy self-image is accommodating. It is forgiving. It permits and allows. It does not demand perfection from us. Perfection is something that we aspire to. It is being gentle with oneself, warts and all, accepting all aspects of oneself, forgiving one's failures and defects, and accepting that we can sometimes make mistakes and fail. By thinking like this, having that big vision and positive self-image, one can accommodate all aspects of oneself and still continue to strive for one's own betterment. I want to stress that this is not self-indulgent. This is not just going whatever whim it is that makes you feel better for a few minutes. This is about acknowledging, you might say, your own Buddha nature, your inner perfection, your qualities of love, compassion, wisdom, and so forth. And by doing this, we also become more aware of how we suffer, why we suffer, and so forth. And as was mentioned by Galwan Karmapa, by connecting with this in ourselves, we can connect with how other people suffer and other animals suffer. And we become much more able to do Tonglen for other people. And when we're out mingling in the real world, more able to help them there as well. So that is one obstacle, and a way to remove that obstacle about feeling that somehow or another you're just unworthy, that you feel depressed, that you're angry at yourself and so forth, and develop positive feelings about yourself. Actually love yourself. Now, another obstacle is to be angry at your mother. It's very common in American culture. There's so many, you might say, parts of our culture that encourage it even. And so it makes it difficult to start with your mother when you're working with Tonglen for other people. And we have relationship problems. And frequently, quite honestly, when we hate our parents, there's also an element of hating ourselves. Depression is, it can be hating other people, and it can be hating ourselves. So another aspect is to work with anger towards other people. I had a problem growing up with my mother, and there was no way I could start with my mother, so I chose my grandmother. So when we're working with another person, which is the next step, start with somebody that you have warm feelings towards. And you're the one that decides that. It could be your mother, it could be your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, could be a pet dog. And memory that I have that sticks in my mind, I was at the parking lot of a series of shops along a city street, and I saw a biker come out of a store, black leather jacket, chains, you know, the leather wallet with a chain on it to his belt, and studs, the hat, and so forth, you know, the get up. But he had a clear plastic bag of water in his hand, and in it was a goldfish. He had a warm spot in his heart for a goldfish. So whatever you can find that you have a warm spot in your heart for, that you would like to work with them, doing Tonglen, and remove their suffering and give them your happiness, start with that person or animal. Now, pets are tricky because it's easy to get into pity, where you feel superior to the animal rather than as their equal. And we can use this feeling of superiority, which is a form of arrogance, to prop up actually feeling inferior, which goes back to the exercise that I just did. It's really important to get to know yourself at a very deep level. And if you find that you're working with a pet and you actually have this feeling of being superior to the pet, then maybe go back to unlocking the heart. But anyway, I used my grandmother because my grandmother had a very special place in my life, childhood, and after that. And then after working with my grandmother, then as is the common practice, is you spread out and you start putting people in front that are further removed from you, or you have less compassion for. Now, there are some other obstacles that can arise. One is that fear of catching the suffering that you're removing from the other person. For instance, a person that would have cancer. It can be very difficult to imagine breathing in that cancer and then breathing out your health, giving them your health. So Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said something like this: if you imagine eating a meal, does that fill you up? Well, of course it doesn't. So this is an imaginary practice, and you are not going to be catching an illness from another person. But what's good about this is if that you do have this fear, this gives you another way to work with fear. And Another type of fear is that we have various kinds of fear, but we usually, instead of acknowledging the fear, we just keep busy and don't acknowledge it and keep so busy that the fear doesn't have a chance to really arise. It gets buried. And so we get into compulsive behaviors of various kinds. So it's good to feel fear, but then to go beyond the fear, to realize that you don't have to give in to the fear, that we can go beyond the fear. When we're experiencing fear, we go into a protective mode. We protect our ego from experiencing harm and having other kinds of negative experiences. And the fear begins to rule our lives. This is an experience that I had when I was working as a prison chaplain. It was really very good experience for me. I learned a lot. Well, I liked the job so much that I was willing to have an hour and 45-minute commute to work. And sometimes I would leave late in the morning and knew right as soon as I left home that I would arrive late. And there was only one way into the prison. The parking lot was right out in front of that door in. The warden had an office with a window that looked out onto the parking lot, and to get from my car to the door, I would go by the window, and occasionally the warden would even be there and wave to me. If I wanted to, for an hour and 45 minutes, I could worry about, would the warden be in the window? Would he see me? And if he saw me, what kind of consequences would I experience? But even though if I did that, I could only be late once. I could imagine being late 500 times in an hour and 45 minutes. But what's the point? You can only be late once. So when I started having thoughts about being late and worrying and so forth, I would let go of them. And it might be they would come up again a few minutes later, but let go of them. It was just pointless to keep holding on to them. It turned out I was never, ever, no one ever said, you know, you arrived late. Never happened. And I just imagine thinking how many hours I could have thought in my career there about arriving late. And what a waste that would have been, and how much of an emotional drain that would be. So give yourself a break. Let go, look in, find the fear, and let go of it or go beyond it. So Tonglen is a way of cultivating fearlessness, and it's very good to cultivate that fearlessness. Shamatha can become an obstacle. Actually, you can develop shamatha to the point where you cling to the peace, that you look at shamatha as taking a vacation or taking a break to avoid negative feelings, to avoid dealing with depression, discouragement, and so forth. But with Tonglen, we bring it on and we work with it. That you could say Tonglen is a reality check. How are you doing? And so forth. It's a way to develop courage. We start small and move towards the big. I taught this in the prison, this very unlocking the heart that I just went through. I would do all-day Saturday programs, and this would be part of the program frequently, and I found that inmates related to it very well. I once had an inmate that said this. He was attending my Saturday programs, which were occasional, it wasn't regular, but I had a regular meditation hour every week. And he came, he was very, very diligent. And one day when he came down to the office area where we had this group meeting room, and he said, you know, there's a lot of suffering in this place. His suffering had decreased, and he had started seeing beyond his own little world. And then he said, and it's not just the inmates that are suffering, it's the guards that are suffering too. So as we develop more fearlessness, as we develop more compassion and love and kindness for ourselves, our suffering decreases, and we start seeing other people more, and we start seeing their suffering, and we start seeing how they are suffering. And of course, you start realizing it doesn't have to be that way, because I have been able to reduce my suffering a little bit. That's when bodhicitta really starts to develop. When you realize I've benefited from this, other people could benefit from this. May I be able to benefit other people? So another fear is that it'll reduce your happiness. And it's like, well, there's a limited amount of happiness. There's a limited amount of health. That life is a zero-sum game, that anything that I gain means that somebody else has to have less of it. And of course, that is totally incorrect. That there have been studies done. This is a simple study where you take a group of, and I suspect they're college students. I haven't read these studies. But you take a group of people that you're studying and give them a happiness test. And then you divide that group into two groups. Both groups gets $100 cash. And the one group, the instructions are to leave and spend it on yourself. Don't spend a penny on anybody else. Just spend it on yourself and come back. And then we're going to give you another happiness test. The other group is, you have to spend this $100 on other people. You can't spend a penny on yourself, and then come back and we'll give you a happiness test. Well, guess which group is the happiest when they come back and get tested the second time? It's the people that spent the money on others. So it might surprise you, but Tonglen can actually make you a happier person. That we can go beyond in our daily life. The stress, the feeling of being overwhelmed, the busyness, and so on and so forth. that we can have a sense of contentment, satisfaction, feeling good about ourselves and so forth, and still do Tonglen, do our practice and so forth. And in fact, by doing all these things, it will lead to being more content, more satisfied. And as that quote by Tralik Rinpoche said, that we will still have this motivation to do better, to improve, and so forth. It's not just sitting around, oh, I'm happy, I'm satisfied, I don't have to do anything more. So when you're doing Tonglen, it's good to do a session beginning with shamatha. This calms the mind down a little bit. Tonglen can agitate the mind. And then at the end, do more shamatha meditation. And it's good to have a feeling of space or spaciousness, and just feeling more open, a feeling of, well, thoughts are coming and they're going, and just letting it happen. Finally, I want to talk about ultimate bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta is the true nature of our mind. It is in the 7 points of mind training. It's slogans number 2 through number 6. And ultimate bodhicitta is beyond description. You experience it, but you cannot really put it into words. And the point is that we have this great bliss, Dewa Chan, land of great bliss. This is part of ultimate bodhicitta. It can't be, you might say, lose it. It can't be harmed in any way. We have Buddha nature, so this is part of us. And the Mahayana analogy is the sun and the clouds. When the clouds are removed, the sun shines brightly. That's our ultimate nature. And we have to realize this is who we really are. And with Tonglen, we're trying to bring this out. And on the other hand, we have relative bodhicitta, and that is aspiration, and then engagement. Aspiration is, may I be able to travel the path. It's described a bit like looking at a map, and engagement is traveling the path. And so again, Tonglen and working with these obstacles is this engagement bodhicitta of traveling the path, and the path ends with the complete realization of the absolute. And with that, I have covered most of what I wanted to cover. So if there are any questions, I think this is a good time to have a little bit of discussion.
Again, if you'd like to ask a question or discuss something, please put a comment into the chat, and we will take it from there. And with that, let me also bring the Chinese speakers into this part so that they can participate equally.
现在中文主要移到这个大家的全部立体的地方。如果大家有问题可以提出来。
We have a question from, is it okay to do Tonglen for people who are no longer alive? If it's okay, or is it okay if I do it for people in my past or do it to for myself as a child?
Well, for people that are no longer alive, I've never heard that discussed. But Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche would say this about dedicating merit, that you can dedicate merit to a person that has died 100 years ago. And that as a result of that, I'm going to extrapolate and say, yes, do Tonglen for a person that has died. It will help you develop compassion, but remember to focus on the person, not on the suffering of death.
这个当然问题就是说，可以对于这个已经往生的死者做这个直达交换法呢？那这个 Lama Yeshe 的说法是说，根据Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche 的说法呢，他说你可以对这个已经过去死亡了100年的人做回向。那所以说，我认为呢，可以，就是说你可以就是对一个亡者呢做这个直达交换法，但是呢，你可能就不能够做，就是当他死亡那个痛苦的部分，那个部分呢，那就不要做那个部分的这个直达交换。那说。
We have another question. This is about the doing the exercise on ourselves in the future. Do we imagine the 5 minute later ourselves dissolve into ourselves, or just imagine it disappearing and focus on ourselves again?
Yeah, you don't dissolve into yourself. You have actually become the future you, because 5 minutes have passed.
然后这个第二个问题是关于说你在观未来的你的时候，那当完毕的时候，是不是要将这个未来你跟你自己这个画融到自己？拉玛耶谢是说其实不必，因为你一旦观想完了以后呢，那你自己就变成了你未来的你。So.
And we have another question. Wanted to ask about what skillful means we would use for self-compassion without developing ego attachment and overvaluation of our self-worth.
Well, first of all, remember that you are a sentient being, and you are worthy vessel of receiving love, that we want to love all beings. We want to have compassion for all beings. And it's rather, I would say, almost humorous to think I can love all beings except for myself, because there's just something wrong with loving myself. But it's loving yourself, not being different or better from other people, but just realizing that you are like other people, and that you start with yourself and then you work out from there.
然后在这个问题就是说，我们如果说发展了自己爱自己的这个方法，是不是会产生自我的一种执着？那拉玛一些说，其实不是的，因为呢，我们本来就是在爱的过程中间，我们不需要把自己摒除，因为只是爱人和自己呢，其实是没有差别的。那我们不需要把自己跟别人分开，因为这种爱本身就是没有这种分别心的。老师。
There are no other questions in the chat at this moment.
Well, then I'll say something else. when I started meditating, I was seeing a psychiatrist and on a very strong antidepressant medication. And about 9 months after I got off of the medication, I took refuge with Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. And he looked at the names on 4 different refuge cards before he gave me my refuge name. And if you want to say this was an accident, I would say, I don't think so. And the name that he gave me was Diligent Loving Kindness. And what I came to discover as I practiced more and more and looked more and more into my neurosis, my kleshas and so forth, was that for me, at least, my depression had 2 aspects: laziness and anger towards myself. Well, loving kindness is the remedy for anger, and diligence is the remedy for laziness. So again, I feel very confident that we need to love ourselves. And when it came to taking bodhisattva vows, this is what he said to everybody. He said, well, our cards haven't come back from the printers yet. So for your bodhisattva name, use your refuge name. Now I have to have loving kindness for everybody. I think that sums it up. What I've been trying to say tonight is love yourself and then let it spread to other people. Let it become an epidemic of love. Maybe that's the wrong word, but let that love touch all people eventually. Be diligent about it.
在大家都没有问题，所以我再跟大家讲一下，在我在学这个禅修的时候呢，那时候我是有这个忧郁病的，那时候我在吃一边在吃的药，在我做了9个月以后呢，然后呢，我到了这个 Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche那边做皈依，然后在那个地方的时候呢，他皈依的时候会给我们皈依卡，他找了4张卡，最后找到了一张卡，上面写的我要做，就是我的名字就是勤奋的做慈悲与爱的修持。然后我想这个不可能，这个不是一个意外，因为呢，我有2个问题，一个就是懒，另外一个常常会对自己产生这个不高兴的想法。这个对于这个懒惰呢，这个勤奋是对治它；对自己呢生气，那慈悲爱就是对治它。所以我基本上就一直就有这个名字，就是基本上来对治我这2个的坏的缺点。到后来呢 ，Khenpo 呢给我菩萨戒的时候，他就跟我们讲说，因为没有办法印出来，所以我们每个人的名字呢就跟以前我们受皈依戒的名字一样。所以我的感受就是说啊，那我就必须要一直到精勤的做修习这个慈悲与爱。那我现在在最后就想跟大家讲一件事情，其实我们每一个人自己呢，我们自己是一个值得我们爱的对象。同样呢，在这个时候呢，我们应该尽力的去不只爱自己，也要将我们的爱呢扩展到别人身上，给他们爱，给他们温暖，让我们这个爱呢变成像一个流行病一样。可能这个不是一个很好的用词，但是呢，我希望我们尽量能够将我们的爱呢，能够散发到各个地方去，这是我对大家的一个祈愿。老师。
Still no new questions?
Well, if there are no more questions, then we could do the concluding prayers. last call for questions.
I don't
Well,
see
this
anything
one-
coming in.
Okay.
So I'll share the screen. Oh,
Oh, I see
one
it.
question did just come in.
Yeah,
And that was wanted to ask about, when doing Tonglen, how long do we want our session to be?
good question. I would say that including the shamatha at the beginning and a little bit of shamatha at the end, it would be nice to at least have 10 minutes. And if possible, to extend it some, try it. But 10 minutes, really, it takes time for your mind to get into, you might say, the swing of things.
Lama Mark, you're muted.
这个地方就是做自他交换法的时候呢，要花多少时间？他那么也显示说，大概10分钟吧，因为包括前面的这个纸，还有后面一点纸，总共要花，起码我觉得10分钟。包括前面和后面的纸，应该这样子会让你能够有一点作用。老师。
Nothing else came in, so I will resume the share.
Okay. Gyal kun ning jay rang shuk karma pa. Gyal kun trin lei chi duk karma pa. Gyal kun duk sok wang kur karma pa. Organ do do trin lei jap ten so. So nam di yi tam che zik pane. Tok ne ne pedra nam pam che ne. Ke gana che bala. Patruk pa ye. Si pe so le dro wa nerd ro shok. Jam pa pa wo ji tar ken pa dang. Kuntu zangpo de yang de jinte. De da kun yi je suk dak luk ching. Ge wa de da tam che rap tu no. Sa je kusum ne pe jin lap dang. Cho ne min gur den pe jin lap dang. Gan dun mi che dun pe jin lap ki. Jitag no wa mo nam drupar sho. Du shi le gyal gyal wei trin le pa. Karma pa ten ten pe ning bodhi. Chok tar kun kyap kya ching yun mi che. Tak para pel pel wei. Tashi sho. I want to thank Mark for translating and Myeon for facilitating. And I want to thank all of you for attending, and may you find this beneficial.